The day I received divorce papers was the same day my twin sons brought them home with a smile. Hi, my name is Anna, and I'm 34 years old. I never thought I'd be telling this story, at least not like this. That afternoon started just like any other. I was folding laundry, humming along to some old song, when I heard the front door swing open. "Mom!" Noah yelled. "Dad gave us a letter for you." He waved it like it was a drawing he'd made in school. Liam stood behind him, smiling like he had just completed a secret mission. I reached out, still smiling. But when I saw Daniel's handwriting on the envelope, something inside me froze. I opened it slowly, carefully. I didn't want to scare the boys. But the second I read the first line, "Petition for dissolution of marriage," my breath caught in my throat. I couldn't process it. I just stood there, gripping the paper like it might disappear if I stared long enough. Daniel was divorcing me, and he hadn't even told me himself. "Are we having pizza tonight?" Liam asked, tugging on my sleeve. I looked at him and forced a smile I didn't feel. "Yeah, sweetie. Go wash your hands." The moment they ran off, I collapsed onto the couch. My knees just gave out. I stared at the paper again and again, as if maybe I'd read it wrong. But I hadn't. We weren't fighting. We hadn't even argued in weeks. He'd just become distant, cold, always working late, always tired. I asked him so many times if something was wrong. He always said no. "Just stress, babe." Now I realized he'd been planning this for months. He didn't even have the courage to hand me the papers himself. He sent them with our children. I wanted to scream, to cry, to call him and demand answers. But instead, I opened my laptop and typed into Google, "What to do when your husband files for divorce." I couldn't think straight. I was angry, hurt, betrayed. That night, after putting Noah and Liam to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen with the envelope in front of me. I didn't even touch it again. I just stared at it like it was some kind of trap. Then my phone buzzed, a text from Daniel. "I hope the boys gave you the papers. It's better this way." Better for who? For the man who walked away from our family without a word? For the father who let his kids carry his shame? That night, as rain tapped against the kitchen window, I made myself a promise. This will not break me. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's text. "It's better this way." Better? For who? Certainly not for me. And definitely not for our sons. The next morning, I packed the boys' lunches like I always did. I kissed them on the forehead, tied their shoelaces, and waved them off as they ran to the school bus. But inside, I was crumbling. The moment the door closed behind me, I let the mask fall. I dropped to my knees in the hallway and cried. I sobbed into my hands like I hadn't in years. It wasn't just about the divorce, it was the betrayal, the disrespect. He had made me feel invisible. I gave him 12 years of my life. I put my career on hold when I got pregnant with the twins. I supported him through job losses, through his mother's illness, through every rough patch. And now, he throws me away like I was just a phase? By midday, I pulled myself together. I had to. The boys would be back soon, and they couldn't see me like that. I called Daniel. He didn't answer. I called again, straight to voicemail. So I texted, "We need to talk, tonight, face to face." No response. Instead, he sent me an email that read more like a legal memo than a message to the woman he once promised forever. He'd moved out, was staying at a friend's place for now, and preferred to communicate through lawyers. I couldn't believe it. He was erasing me. That evening, when the boys were asleep, I walked into our bedroom. Well, my bedroom now, and started opening drawers. They were half empty. His shirts, gone. His cologne, gone. His watch, the one I gave him on our 5th anniversary, also gone. But he'd left the tie I once bought him for Father's Day, the one with the twins' handprints on it. I held it to my chest and sobbed quietly. That was the night I realized. He hadn't just left me. He'd planned it so I couldn't even fight. I called my sister Emily and told her everything. She gasped. "He did what? Anna, are you okay? I'm coming over." "No, Em, I just needed to say it out loud." We talked for over an hour. She listened, didn't judge, didn't try to fix it, just stayed on the line while I let it all out. And when we hung up, she said something I'll never forget. "He might have blindsided you, but you're still standing. That says everything." I stared at my reflection in the mirror that night, eyes puffy, heart broken, but I was still there. Still me. Still Anna. Maybe even stronger than I thought. The next few days were a blur. I went through the motions, making breakfast, helping with homework, folding laundry, but I was completely disconnected, like I was watching someone else live my life. I didn't tell the boys anything yet. How could I? They were only 9. How do you explain to children that the man they look up to just walked away? Every night after they fell asleep, I sat in the living room staring at my phone, waiting for a message from Daniel. An apology, an explanation, anything. But silence. Instead, I got a call from a lawyer. "Ms. Hayes, we've been retained by Mr. Hayes to initiate divorce proceedings. You'll be receiving documents within the week." My hand went numb. It was happening. He wasn't coming back. I asked the lawyer a question I never thought I'd have to ask. "Is he asking for custody?" She paused. "Number sole custody has not been requested. He's seeking joint custody, but is open to limited visitation depending on your agreement." Joint custody? Of course he was. He wanted to play dad when it was convenient and disappear when it wasn't. That night, I opened Daniel's social media page. He'd blocked me, but curiosity got the best of me, so I checked from an old account I'd forgotten I had. And there it was, a photo. Daniel, smiling, holding hands, with a woman I'd never seen before. The caption? "Fresh starts and honest love," posted just 2 days after he left. My heart sank. So that was it. He didn't fall out of love with me. He fell into someone else. I stared at the photo until my vision blurred from tears. All those nights he came home late, the sudden work trips, the distance in his eyes that I kept blaming on stress. It all made sense now. He had been planning this for months. The woman in the photo looked young, carefree, like she'd never folded a single load of laundry in her life. She wasn't raising his kids. She wasn't living with his flaws. She got the best version of Daniel, polished, rehearsed, romantic. And I got left behind with the broken pieces. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table with a bottle of red wine I hadn't opened in years. Not since my 30th birthday, when Daniel surprised me with a trip to the coast. I remember thinking back then, I'm so lucky. I really got my happy ending. What a joke. At some point I opened a notebook and started writing. Not for anyone else, just for me. I wrote down everything I wanted to scream at him, everything I'd kept buried for too long. "You made me feel like I wasn't enough. You took my loyalty for granted. You chose comfort over character." And then, I wrote something I didn't expect. "One day, I'll thank you." Because deep down, a part of me knew. As much as it hurt, he gave me something I hadn't had in years, a reason to choose myself. The morning after I found that picture of Daniel and her, I woke up with a pounding headache and a hollow feeling in my chest, not from the wine, from the weight of truth. The boys were already awake, watching cartoons in the living room like it was any other Saturday. Their laughter echoed down the hall, piercing through the silence I'd wrapped myself in. I stood in the doorway and just watched them. They had no idea their world had changed forever. I wasn't ready to tell them. Not yet. I made pancakes, blueberry, their favorite, and poured orange juice into the dinosaur cups they'd been using since they were toddlers. I tried to smile. I even managed to laugh when Liam told a silly joke he'd clearly made up on the spot. But inside, I was unraveling. Around noon, I got a message from Daniel. "I'll be by at 4 to pick up my things. Please have the boys out of the house." No, "Hi." No, "How are you?" Just instructions. I stared at the screen for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, itching to type something cruel. But I didn't. I packed up the boys and took them to my sister's place. I told her what was going on, finally letting the words tumble out of my mouth like broken glass. She was furious, not surprised, but furious. "He's a coward," she said. "He didn't just leave you, Anna. He left them. Don't ever let him forget that." I stayed at her house until well past 5. When I finally got home, the driveway was empty. He was gone. And so were half the hangers in the closet. I walked through the house like it was a crime scene. He took his shoes from the mudroom, the shaving kit from the bathroom, his favorite coffee mug from the kitchen. The little things stung the most. But what hurt even more? He didn't take the family photos. Not the one of our wedding. Not the picture of him holding the twins in the hospital. Not the framed shot from their first day of kindergarten. It was like he was trying to erase the life we built. Like we were just a chapter he'd skimmed through. That night, after I put the boys to bed, I opened the closet and stared at the empty space where his clothes used to be. There was something final about it, like the silence had a shape now, and it lived in that corner of our bedroom. I curled up on the bed, hugging one of his old hoodies, and cried until my body ached. I wasn't crying because I wanted him back. I was crying because I didn't recognize the woman he left behind. I had given everything to that marriage. I put my dreams on hold. I carried the mental load of parenting, the emotional labor of making holidays magical, the invisible weight of keeping everything together, and in return I got discarded, traded in for someone younger, shinier, simpler. The next morning I did something impulsive. I cut my hair, not just a trim, I chopped it, right there in the bathroom with a pair of kitchen scissors. It was uneven, messy, liberating. I looked in the mirror and saw someone I hadn't seen in years. Me, raw, unfiltered, not trying to be perfect or pleasing. Then I grabbed a garbage bag and started clearing out what was left of him. His old socks, the books he never finished, the cologne I used to love but now made me nauseous. I found an old card tucked in the nightstand, a birthday card from 4 years ago. "You're the love of my life. Thank you for choosing me every day." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so deeply ironic. He had stopped choosing me long before he had the guts to say it out loud. I lit the card on fire in the sink. The flames curled around the edges, eating the words he probably didn't even mean when he wrote them. It felt like closing a door. No, slamming it shut. And for the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. I didn't wake up healed. There was no magical moment where the pain just disappeared. But the silence in the house that morning, it didn't crush me like before. It just was. The boys had a birthday party to attend that Saturday. It was for one of their classmates, and I almost said no. I didn't want to see the other parents, force a smile, pretend I was okay. But they needed normalcy. I couldn't let my heartbreak become their trauma. So I pulled myself together. I put on makeup for the first time in weeks. Nothing dramatic, just enough to cover the grief under my eyes. At the party, I stood in a corner with a cup of lukewarm coffee, watching the boys laugh and run around. It was the kind of pure joy I hadn't felt in what felt like forever. That's when I heard her name. "Daniel's new girlfriend brought cupcakes," one mom whispered behind me. I froze. She was there. She was there. I turned slowly, and there she was, Natalie, the woman my husband left me for. Blonde, young, pretty in that effortless Instagram-filtered kind of way. Wearing a sundress, holding a tray of perfectly decorated cupcakes like she was auditioning for a reality show called Steal a Husband, and standing right beside her was Daniel. He saw me. He didn't flinch, didn't look guilty, just nodded, like we were strangers who'd once gone to the same college. That was the moment something snapped inside me. Not anger, not sadness, clarity. He had replaced me so easily, so publicly, without a second thought. And yet I was the one who had been questioning my worth? No more. I walked over to my boys, knelt down and said, "Mommy's going to run to the car. I'll be back in 5 minutes." They nodded, too distracted by balloons and cake to care. Then I turned and walked, head high, right past Daniel and Natalie. I didn't acknowledge them, didn't even look at them, and it killed him. I could feel his eyes on me, waiting for me to crack. But I didn't. I sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel, shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I had taken the power back. Later that night, after the boys were asleep, I opened my laptop and started something I hadn't done in years. I wrote. Just a simple document. The title? things I want. It wasn't about revenge, it wasn't about him, it was about me. I listed everything I had put on hold during the marriage: go back to school, start yoga again, take the boys on a road trip, sleep in the middle of the bed. I cried while typing it, not because I was sad, but because it was the first time in forever I was imagining a future that was mine. And then I did something radical. I created a new email account, a new bank account, a new calendar labeled Anna's Life. It felt small, but also enormous. That weekend, I booked a therapy session. It wasn't easy. I almost canceled 3 times. But I showed up. I sat across from a kind-looking woman with soft eyes, and when she asked, "Why are you here?" I whispered, "Because I forgot who I was, and I want her back." She didn't tell me it would be fast. She didn't promise me it would be easy, but she promised me it was possible, and I held on to that like a lifeline. Each day since, I've done one thing, just one small thing, to move forward. Some days it's laundry. Other days it's applying for courses or taking a walk without crying. But every day is mine, and for the first time in a long time, that feels like enough. I didn't tell anyone I started therapy, not my parents, not my best friend, not even the boys. It wasn't because I was ashamed, it was because I wanted this space to be just mine, a room where I didn't have to be a mom, an ex-wife, or a strong woman, just Anna. In that quiet room, I slowly started to unpack everything. Not just the betrayal, but the years of shrinking myself, of putting everyone else first, of becoming so small that I barely recognized the woman in the mirror. I remember telling my therapist, "I don't think I've ever really been alone. I went from being a daughter to a girlfriend to a wife to a mother, but I don't think I've ever just been me." She looked at me and said, "Then maybe it's time." That simple sentence shook me, because it was terrifying and freeing. So I started saying no. No to people who drained me. No to events I didn't want to attend. No to the voice in my head that told me I had to smile through pain. One afternoon, while cleaning out the hall closet, I found a box labeled Anna's Stuff. It was full of journals, photos, and old sketchbooks. I had forgotten I used to draw. It had been years. I flipped through the pages, messy lines, quick sketches of strangers in coffee shops, doodles from when the boys were babies, and then I saw one that made me stop. A self-portrait, drawn in pencil, eyes wide, confident, smiling. I didn't even remember drawing it, but there she was. I was there. That night, I pulled out my old sketch pad and started again. The lines were shaky at first, but it wasn't about perfection, it was about reconnection. I lost hours that night just sketching, and when I finally looked up, it was 2 a.m. The boys were asleep. The house was quiet, and for once, my mind was too. Later that week, I saw Daniel again. We were doing the awkward custody handoff in a parking lot. He was scrolling on his phone when I arrived. Didn't even look up at first, but when he did, I saw it. The surprise. I was wearing jeans and a white blouse, nothing special, but I had red lipstick on, and I was smiling. Not at him, not for him. I was just smiling, because I felt good. He stared for a second too long, then mumbled, "You look different." And I replied, "I am." He tried to ask how I'd been, but I didn't owe him that conversation. So I just handed him the boys' overnight bag and said they had a good week. I packed snacks in the front pocket. And then I walked away. No drama, no tears, just peace. That night I took myself out to dinner, alone. I brought a book, ordered my favorite pasta, had a glass of wine, and didn't check my phone once. I watched couples, families, waiters rushing around, and I didn't feel lonely. I felt present. I was no longer mourning what I had lost. I was finally discovering what I had gained. I had me. It sounds cliché, I know, but sometimes the biggest love story is the one you write with yourself. I'm not saying it's all easy now. I still have moments. Nights when the house is too quiet. Mornings when I wake up and reach for someone who's no longer there. But I also have days filled with laughter, sketchbooks filled with hope, and a heart that is no longer shattered, but rebuilding, piece by piece, stroke by stroke, and with every passing day, I am remembering who I was always meant to be. I didn't expect to see him again, not in real life, not at the gallery, but there he was, Ethan. We met years ago in college. He was the first person who truly saw me, not as someone's girlfriend, not as a future wife or mother, just as Anna. We had a spark back then, but timing was cruel. He moved away. I got married. End of story. Or so I thought. Now, standing in front of one of my sketches, my own, Ethan turned to me and said, "Anna? I almost didn't recognize you." I laughed. Yeah, I get that a lot lately. We talked for a while, catching up in that awkward, careful way people do after years apart. He was in town temporarily, consulting for an arts nonprofit. I was showing my work publicly for the first time. It felt surreal. He asked if I wanted to grab a coffee sometime, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty for saying yes. I wasn't betraying anyone. I wasn't rushing into anything. I was simply open to possibility. When we met that weekend, the conversation flowed easily. It was like our time apart had melted away. He asked about the boys, about what had happened, and I told him. Not every painful detail, but enough for him to understand the scars I now carried. Then he told me something that stopped me cold. "Back then," he said, "I thought you were the most brilliant person I'd ever met. But I also knew you didn't believe it yet." And I realized he had always seen me clearly, even when I couldn't. He didn't try to flirt. He didn't try to fix me. He just listened. It felt like breathing again after being underwater for too long. That night I sat on my porch with a glass of tea watching the stars. I thought about how far I'd come, from crying alone in my bedroom to laughing across from someone who remembered my favorite poems. But I also knew this wasn't a fairy tale. This was real life. I still had responsibilities. I still had a co-parenting schedule. I still had wounds that flinched when pressed too hard. But now I also had boundaries. I had dreams. I had a voice that no longer whispered but spoke clearly. The next few weeks with Ethan were gentle. We went on long walks. He helped me hang frames for my second small showing. He never pushed, never assumed. One evening, after he'd helped me clean paint off my hands from a messy project with the boys, he looked at me and said, "You glow differently when you're doing what you love." And I believed him, because I had started to believe in myself, not because of him, but because I had done the work. I had clawed my way out of grief, doubt, and betrayal, one breath at a time. Was Ethan part of my future? I didn't know yet, but I knew he wasn't a replacement. He was a reflection, a reminder of who I'd once been, and who I might become again. The boys liked him. They didn't call him anything yet, just Mom's friend. That was enough for now. One night, my oldest asked, "Are you happy, Mom?" And I answered, honestly, "I'm getting there." Because healing isn't a destination. It's a journey, and for the first time I was walking it on my own 2 feet, with purpose, with peace, and with hope. They say closure is a myth, that we don't ever truly get it, just softer versions of the pain. But I disagree, because I found mine. It came slowly, quietly, not in some grand moment, but in all the little choices I made to come back to myself, like the night I sat across from my ex-husband James at the diner where we used to go before things fell apart. He wanted to talk. He had been more stable lately, trying harder to be present for the boys. And I respected that. We talked like two people who had once shared a life, and now only shared memories and responsibilities. At one point he looked at me and said, "You're different now." I smiled. "I know." He paused, as if choosing his words carefully. "I think I liked you better this way. I just didn't know how to handle it." It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest he could get. And I didn't need more than that, because I had already forgiven him, not for him, but for me. Holding on to that anger had been like drinking poison and expecting him to die. I was done carrying that weight. The boys were thriving. They had stability now. 2 homes filled with love, even if they looked different. I'd opened my third art show. Small, but full of life. People were connecting to the rawness in my pieces, especially the ones I'd painted on the nights I couldn't sleep. Ethan came. He stood beside me, not in front of me. He celebrated but never claimed credit. That night, after everyone had left, he helped me pack up the leftover wine and stack chairs. And then, as I turned off the gallery lights, he asked, "So what's next for you, Anna?" I looked around, at the empty space that had once scared me, at the art that had come from my own hands, at the version of myself I never thought I'd see again. I said, "I don't know. But for the first time, I'm not afraid of not knowing." He smiled. "Good. That's the best place to start." We didn't kiss. There was no dramatic music swelling in the background, no Instagram-worthy moment, just 2 people, 1 journey, and a whole lot of hope. I still had bad days, days where doubt crept in like fog, thick and choking. But now I had tools. I had a therapist. I had friends who checked in. I had myself, and I was learning to be enough. Last week, my youngest son handed me a crumpled drawing he'd made at school. It was a woman with long red hair and a big smile, holding hands with 2 kids. "Is that me?" I asked. He nodded. "It's you being happy." I cried in the car later, not because I was sad, but because I realized I was that woman now. Not perfect, not always confident, but happy. I built something out of rubble. I turned pain into color, loneliness into strength, silence into a voice that no longer trembled. So if someone's listening out there, some woman who's wondering if she'll ever feel whole again, let me be proof. You will. It won't happen all at once. You'll fall. You'll cry. You'll second-guess every step. But then one day, you'll wake up and realize you haven't thought about him in weeks. You'll laugh louder than you used to. You'll see your own reflection and recognize the person staring back. And it won't be the woman you were before. It'll be someone new, stronger, wiser, and still full of love. Because heartbreak doesn't kill love. It teaches us where to place it. And this time I placed mine with myself. My name is Anna, and this is how I came back to life.